All right, I think we are
This is the fun
live.
part.
Let me
We hope so.
make sure this is streaming here. Yep, okay, we're live. So thank you
We did
everyone
it.
for tuning in for our Rise and Fall of Flash Gaming panel here at Newgrounds Summer Sessions 2022. Um, this is just a panel I put together because I wanted to sort of reminisce a little bit about the good things of Flash and the bad things of Flash, and maybe play a little bit of our favorite Flash games.
Sweet.
Mostly
There's a
good
lot of
things,
bad
man.
things.
Mostly
What?
good things.
No.
Mostly good things.
A few things, yeah, some good things, some bad things.
Good things came from Flash, but Flash has always been terrible.
So joining me, first off, I'm Mike. Uh, I actually have worked with Flash for way too long. I currently work on the Ruffle Flash emulator that is used on Newgrounds. If you've ever played any old Flash games on Newgrounds, it's probably running in Ruffle. And also joining us is PsychoGoldfish, aka Josh. You want to introduce
It's
yourself?
me. That's I'm PsychoGoldfish, aka Josh. Yeah. I've been working with Flash games for quite a long time. Pretty much owe my entire career to them actually. So yeah, been there since Flash 2.
Flash
And
2,
I
wow.
fucking hate Flash. Yeah, and I fucking hate
I don't
Flash.
think I've ever known anyone that used Flash 2.
Oh, I'm sure Tom used it or something.
And also, special guest is Lewis, who wasn't sure if he could make it, but he's in here, right?
Yeah, I just came back from the New York meet.
He's at the bar. So if you hear a lot of
No, I'm not
background,
at the bar yet. I decided to check in with you guys before I get drunk. So
smart. We'll make you want to drink. There you
yeah, there you go. But it's much cheaper to drink up here than it is downstairs.
go.
Cool. So yeah, just to set the stage a little bit, let's think back to the Stone Age. And I actually like the way, because you're the one that came up with these terms, Josh, so I stole them from you. Um, and we're talking about the mid 90s here, and everyone's still on dial up modems. And I don't know.
Dial-up modems and Flash is like Flash 2, Flash 3 were out basically. So
Right.
what you had back then, basic button interaction, no keyboard interaction, simple mouse games, point click, stuff like that. So that's where we are still in. It's the basic tools. We're scraping sticks together.
Yeah. And for any youngsters who don't know how slow dial up was, it would take about a minute to download 1 megabyte. And now you
Which
download.
for you who don't know what a megabyte is, okay, for reference, let's say you wanted to load up your favorite the waifu photo, okay? Right now they're full HD, but back then the pictures were maybe 800 pixels by 600, and you would watch it render line by line,
Yeah,
and
I
you
mean,
probably wait a good 30 minutes to see that one picture. That's dial up. That's dial up, kids. You don't know what you got. You don't know what you got.
Yeah, I remember I used to download porn, and I'd have to do it overnight because I didn't want anybody to pick up the phone.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah,
had
that's
to
the other
like
thing. You had to be on the phone.
I was like, I had to wait till the next day to
Mom,
knock one
I
out.
got the phone.
It was bad, man.
I mean, yeah, the internet was a pretty boring thing at that point in time. Like the websites were just text and images. Can you believe that? There was no real like interactivity or games or anything like that. But I think what it really changed was when Windows 98 came out, because then it came bundled with a little thing called Flash Player 3, right? And then
Yep.
suddenly this Flash player was on everyone's computer. And now when you go to this website called joecartoon.com, instead of just seeing like a static text and image, you're going to see this fun little thing of a frog in a blender, right? And let me share this to you guys here.
I've never seen this before.
You've never seen this, really?
This
No.
is old school.
I'm
Yeah,
I'm
this is
familiar with Joe Cartoon. I just never.
This is the one that put him on the map.
yeah, this is really old school. Actually, I just noticed it has a typo here. It says instructions instead of
Oh, the
instructions.
other fun thing I want you to pay attention to. This is Frog in a Blender 2000. This isn't even the
Ooh.
original version.
Oh wow,
This is
really?
the
I didn't know
updated
that.
version. Yeah, yeah. He
Yeah.
updated it in Flash 3, I believe.
Oh wow. And yeah, this is 1999 we're talking about here. And
Yeah.
you know, instantly like, wow, I have a button that makes a noise, right?
What are you looking at?
And now this frog is
What?
talking
Voice?
to me.
Wait, there's voice on the internet
Yeah.
on dial-up?
There's voice coming out of my
You ain't got
speakers.
some balls. No balls.
You got no balls, Mike.
Oh, I got some balls,
Like
all right.
I said. No.
And you could sort of
Wow.
see what Flash
What
was
a
good at,
pansy.
right, at this point in time. You could have like simple animations
See.
and little
Hey,
buttons
like
that
a
would make
spin.
other animations play.
Hey, dumbass.
And that's pretty much all Flash did. You know, you can make little slideshows, little animations.
Yeah, it's really good for websites. You can have interactive buttons, things like that.
Cut it up. Whoa, stop, whoa, don't. You suck. Dickweed.
Oh no.
Yeah.
It's so
Audio's
weird.
a little
like,
rough, but it still holds up.
It's so weird to see stuff like this, and this was like all of Newgrounds, like just violence,
Yeah.
just, crude violence,
Did
and
you-
that's it.
Did you guys hear the funk sound at the end there?
Yeah, like
That
the
was the
stock-
sound that came with Flash.
the built-in
Every
Flash
fucking movie
sound.
had that sound in it.
Yeah. So this
Literally
was
a stream of Flash sounds.
the
I'm guilty
internet.
of the door slam.wive.
So yeah, okay. This was Flash 3, right? You can make buttons and animations, right? So
And the big difference between 2 and 3 was, so 2 didn't have what we call movie clips. Movie clips were animations, were within animations, and that was the big thing that changed. So like his frog and all that could run independent of the buttons. In his original version, he had to do scenes for
Wow.
every state of the frog.
Come on.
Yeah.
so like given this, you were probably trying to actually make things around this time, Josh.
Yeah, and we see things like this. A lot of humor stuff. Like
Mhm.
humor was the big thing in early Flash. It was stupid stuff like this, or it was animations like what the hell, Camp Chaos. Around the time when Metallica was trying to fight to get their music off of Napster. Napster was an old pirating platform for those not in the know, and they used to make a whole bunch of movies about how dumb Metallica was. It was pretty funny. So we were all inspired by these, and like these are all like really good artists too. Like
Mhm.
it didn't start with just what you would see on Newgrounds. These were people who had the resources to make cool stuff because they probably worked at some sort of studio, or they worked in an ISP making websites. That's how I got into it. I worked at an ISP. We did interactive websites, and the company I worked for bought me like real official legal Flash. So I was one of the few people who had a legal version back then.
Yeah, that was pretty rare back then.
Yeah. But anybody could get it because you had a 30-day trial, and you could basically, back then you could just reset your clock and it would still work, or you could crack it and it never expired. So everybody could get it. And Macromedia didn't really seem to care. I don't know if they could do much back then. There wasn't a lot you could do in the old internet. But these early sites just showed you like what you could do, and they inspired a lot of people. And I don't know what the timing was between this and when Tom did that Teletubby Funland game. Like if you've been on Newgrounds a while and leveled up, you've probably found Telebubby Funland. The original was just straight up a Teletubbies parody where they'd get high and fucking do all sorts of weird shit, and it was just all point and click stuff. But it was just this whole scene of silly little interactive button games, and they kept popping up everywhere. The assassin stuff came from that, where you could just have a character and you could just click on his face and you'd punch him, whatever, things like that. And there was a few tech channels back then. I forget what it was originally called, ZDTV. It eventually became Tech TV, then eventually became G4 TV. But they would actually show these things on TV too. So like you'd watch them on TV, you're like, holy shit, you can do that on the internet. And I think that's when a lot of people started pirating Flash.
Mhm.
Oh, I want to do that. And yeah, that's the Stone Age. We had sticks and string, and we made
Yep.
some fun stuff out of it.
And buttons. So,
Mhm.
given the limitations of Flash, were you actually trying to make games at this point in time?
Well, the closest thing I would come up with, I did like this very distasteful game where it was just drive-by shooting, and it was just a scene that looped, and the characters would just kind of scroll across, and you could click all the windows, and they would go psh, psh, things like that. I had to wait for Flash 3 to even do that, though. You couldn't do that in Flash 2 because, again, no movie clips. So if I shot a window, it was just a button. It wouldn't stay exploded. I couldn't tell it to go to a different state. So when Flash 3 came out, that's what really revolutionized the ability to make games, because it was like having all these kind of toggle switches built into your
Mhm.
thing. And the one that blew me away, hands down, Pico School, or as it was called back then, Pico.
So let's
Because,
bring that up here.
yeah. And
So
keep in mind, again, we're just working with scenes and buttons. There's no variables. You can't say my inventory equals gun times 1. You can't do any of that. 100% buttons and scenes.
so you can see the button right here,
Mhm.
and this is just
Normal
telling
art quality.
the animation to play. What's interesting is that Tom's actually updated this since the original to make it work a little bit better with Ruffle. I'm gonna turn this down a
So
bit.
now navigating this world, it's literally just clicking parts of the world and going around.
Right.
So
So
he's in the scene right now, and this is the scene with the locker and everything. Every time you open a locker, even, it's a movie clip. So he can tell the lockers to open, and that's one scene. But the minute you get something like you get the gun out of the locker or whatever, you had to actually make a whole new scene with the gun being gone.
So, like, for example, this fire hydrant here.
Yeah.
Once I pick
that,
this up.
Okay, now you're in another scene now, and you'll never go back to that other scene. There's no variable saying I have the fire hydrant. So the smart thing of how he built this, it's mostly linear to where you get things in a certain order, because otherwise that inventory at the bottom, you'd have to have a different inventory for every possible scene.
And now we're gonna go through the first enemy here, right? And this was, I feel like, the most common type of game in this era because all you could have is buttons. So you'd have lots of these like point and shoot games, right? Where you had to point and click at the guy, and it's literally this enemy is just a button that you're clicking on.
This is actually why Flash 3 was revolutionary, because the things you're shooting are actually inside of movie clips. So the button itself is animated in its own thing, where you couldn't do that before. So like, you'll notice early Flash was pretty much strictly for website buttons. And instantly you get stuff like this.
So, this might sound like a new question. So, like, how was the life bar built then?
The life bar, again, every scene. So he actually had to make a scene for every state of the game, for every bit of life you have.
So there was no check on, like, alright.
No, like in theory, you could make this game with just pointable, clickable areas and video files if you didn't know how to program at all.
So, like,
That's how this
basically
game is
you could make this game in like 10 minutes nowadays.
This game would have took a long time because you would have had to toggle every single state, make sure everything was accounted for.
I actually,
Today's technology.
I kind of like this part in here too because it's kind of clever how he darkens the screen,
Yeah.
and then using the button, that's how it lights up the screen by the down state of the button, like the click state of the button.
Tells the background just display a little animation. And that's pretty much the only power you had was helping you play when you hit a button.
So just for fun, because I haven't really seen it in 20 years, I actually went and installed Flash 4
Oh.
just to give us a little peek at what it used to look like back then.
That's how I started.
I think the oldest one I still have is Flash 5, I think.
Yeah, it was actually kind of hard to track this down and get it installed. But just to show you sort of what we're talking about, there wasn't even like a window to type in code.
Timeline, but
Yeah, like this stuff sort of looks the same and hasn't changed in 20 years. But like if I go into the properties here, this is how you would type in code into the game. You would have this drop down of 20 commands. Actually less because this is Flash 4 and we were just talking about Flash 3. And so you could...
The big advent in Flash 4 was you could finally detect keyboard input.
Mm.
You couldn't tell if a key was up or down, however. You could only detect presses. And that's very significant when we get talking about Flash 4 games, because if you have a game like Samurai Asshole, for example, where it's a you walk sideways and move around the screen type of game, it actually relied on the fact that when you push a button down, like you do in a text editor, it just keeps repeating.
Yeah. And like here, this was the big command in the like Flash 3, Flash 4 era. You would use tell target, and you could say you like tell an animation to play or go to a certain frame, and that's it. Like Pico.
Animation in Flash had like a path, so like your stage is root. If you put a movie clip on it, you would give it a name. You could put a movie clip inside that almost indefinitely, and it was just root dot whatever your one is, whatever your child one is, all separated by dots. And you would do tell target. The original tell target, I believe, though, used a slash syntax. I don't even think it used dot syntax.
Right.
Right?
Yep. Use slashes. So
yeah,
it'd be
it was
like
going through a folder in Windows.
it'd be like enemy dot hat slash hat, right? And only later it turned into dots. But yeah, it's crazy to think about. Like all of the game we just saw, Pico Skull, was coded just using this, like just telling animations to play. Like there were no variables for health or anything like that. It's just
we're talking about this stuff and how it evolves. I also want you guys to kind of bear in mind that Mike, as him and his team are working on Ruffle, have to make all these versions.
Oh gosh. Yeah, it's crazy. I'm like learning new stuff about it every day, about all this ancient stuff, like stuff I didn't even know back then, and even if I did know, I've probably forgotten it. So, it's like interesting to go back and see what we had to deal with back then. And also, like, look at this. This is like a list box. This isn't even a text box, so I can't type in here. So like move commands around. Usually you hit these up arrows and down arrows. It's just like, what were they thinking, you know? But that brings me to the next game. Actually, you pointed this one out to me, Josh. I don't think I played this one back in the day. And this is going to show off the keyboard input they added in Flash 4.
Oh yeah, Digi Ninja from Cessnet. Cessnet was actually really popular back in the day. Made a whole bunch of weird little games. Nothing you call a masterpiece today, but
yeah,
definite innovator.
So actually, I picked the wrong window up here. There we go. So actually, I just noticed these like 3D vector arrows here, which
yeah, a lot of people would do pre-rendered stuff and put it in there.
that was actually like
for the stream on Discord for me and Lewis.
no, sorry, no, you guys had it, but there was actually like a big industry of these like third-party pieces of software that would make these 3D like vector renders. Like you would give it a 3D model and it would turn it into vector art, so you could put it in your Flash game.
I can't remember what it was called. I had one I tried doing. It was almost like a first-person game, and I did like a demo of it. It was like 10 seconds long. We went through this warehouse and stuff, and it was really cool. But it was also like the most massive Flash file I've ever seen.
But yeah, okay. So we're in Flash 4 now, and we get keyboard input. Like I can move around, but you can see if I
notice he's only moving one step. Yeah.
Right. If I hold the key down, he only keeps moving once the key repeats. Like if I were to open, Notepad and hold A.
Yeah, exactly.
It would go A.
Holding the button, then there's a wait.
And then A. So people wanted to make, like Mario games, but you really couldn't. Like you could sort of do it, and this was like one attempt. And I was actually trying to play this game, and it's like unplayable.
The other thing to keep in mind, though, a lot of these games feel unplayable today, but the frame rates were significantly lower back in the day. You would set the frame rate high to push it, but the computer was only capable of running it at maybe 30 frames per second. So a lot of these old games that you play today, they seem really fast and impossible to play, but they were built on like really old hardware, and they played pretty good back then. The reason I like this one in particular is he came up with when Mike's jumping, he just jumps forward every time you hit the key, so it's kind of a way to instantly make you move when you jump and not worry about twitch control, just because of the limitation of the keyboard not having a up-down state. It's a really innovative thing that made this Flash 4 game work.
I like this. You have to walk off the edge and then jump. Like you can't make the jump just by standing on it. But yeah, I mean, like, despite the limitations, people were trying to make stuff, make these kind of games that they wanted to make. And it was like kind of interesting to see, even with the limitations, you could actually get something that's kind of fun. Almost. Can I make this jump? I think I gotta walk off. Oh, no. Uh,
And for you guys who don't know Mike, he gets really frustrated when he can't beat a game. he wants to 100% everything he plays. But we don't have time for that, Mike.
yeah. So just one more example. I'm going to show off Samurai Asshole here.
Yeah, this is the same type of control. Done better.
Yeah. So this is, yeah, Flash 4. And still struggling with the keyboard input. So what Tom did is you could, if you tap right, he actually moves a little bit for a while to sort of hide that delay a little bit. It's not perfect, but that's sort of the best you could do. So.
But it fits in with some like old school NES games that move that way too, so you didn't notice.
The one interesting thing here is I don't know how Tom did like the depth swapping, so how you can walk in front of and behind the characters, because you couldn't do that
Flash 4,
easily in Flash 4. No, I don't think you could.
It had a swapping thing, but it wasn't left swap like we know it. I forget exactly how it was. It actually wasn't that difficult.
But even like back to this day, you could sort of see the beginnings of like Castle Crashers.
Yep.
Like Tom was always really into making beat 'em ups. All right, so enough with the Stone Age, right?
Yeah.
And he's still using that platform to make Nightmare Cops.
Flash 4 though.
that would be hilarious.
He's
Let's
using
Flash 4.
Flash 8 now, I believe.
He's moved back down to Flash 2. You know what? He's just, fuck it. I'm just gonna
I mean, he's
go
still using
backwards.
Action Script 2. He's still using Action Script 2, so he really hasn't gone too far past Flash 8, let's be honest.
I needed to get my Tom diss in. Hopefully it's not.
I hope he's watching, and I hope he shed it too.
So now we're gonna get to Flash 5, which I like. You called this the Golden Age.
Revolutionary. Yeah, this is revolutionary. This was the tool set we needed. Keyboard states. You could tell if a key was up, down, when it was pressed, when it was released. You had actual ActionScript as we know it as a language now. The first real version of ActionScript 2, where you could write proper code. If you're a programmer today and you try writing in this old language, it is terrible. But back then, oh my god, I would say it was better than JavaScript back then, honestly.
Yeah. So I guess that's the big thing we should point out is that Adobe basically, or I'm sorry, at that time it was Macromedia. Macromedia took JavaScript and basically bolted it into Flash, and that's what the first version of ActionScript was. It was basically a sort of dumbed down version of JavaScript.
Yeah, filled in the gaps that JavaScript missed, so it made it better.
So let's see, which game should I bring up here first? Actually, I like this one, Skull Kid. Let's look at Skull Kid. This is another sort of classic game.
It's still in like the most popular games.
Yeah, that's what I was crazy because I was
never understood it. I mean, it's a good game and it's aged okay, but still there is insane to me.
I don't like it. I was like, really?
Well, that's what's crazy to me is that I was looking at it has 25 million views on Newgrounds, which is insane. It's like YouTube numbers.
I think it's one of the first games that got viral attention back in the day.
Yeah, if he had submitted that to YouTube, he would have got one of those silver plaque things, right?
So immediately you can see like the keyboard input actually works, right? There's no weird delay or anything, which is kind of cool.
Where am I looking?
Do you guys not see? There we go.
Okay, now I see it. Okay.
Lewis doesn't know how to Discord.
No, it said, never mind. Keep on.
So another interesting thing, because you mentioned, Josh, that the games ran kind of bad back then, so that this has like the quality toggle where I can press 1 to make it low quality, turn off the anti-aliasing.
Yep.
So a lot of games sort of had that.
What we would do in a lot of games, if we wanted to look pretty but run fast, we'd actually have to use raster art and then run it in low quality. But it also made the file size get pretty roof. That was rough on that. But we're also getting to the point now where people are starting to get cable and starting to get DSL connections. So you're getting multi-megabyte connections. Like, man, I had a connection back then that was like a whopping 6 megabytes per second. Like, that was insane.
Oh, I guess that brings up another thing that we could talk about, in that one of the cool things about Flash is that the files were so small, right? because it
And a
uses.
part of that, if you'll notice, like the music they chose, like everybody used very short loops back then, not full
Mhm.
songs. Because an MP4 file or an MP3 file for a full song, even today, is still 4 to 8 megabytes, and that was a long time to download back
I like these pictures in the background. It's just like Judge Judy.
then.
And I guess the other thing, in case people aren't really familiar, is that Flash uses vector art, right? Like you mentioned earlier, as opposed to raster art or pixels. So vector art's a ton smaller. So, for example, if I were to convert this art on the screen to, a raster art, at 1080p, it's huge, right? It would be a huge file size. But, with vector art, I can scale it up. It remains sharp, and it's a tiny, tiny file size. And that's
It's a list of curves and lines and fill colors, and that's it.
And I mean that's because Flash it started, when dial-up was a thing, so they had no choice but to make the file small, right?
I also want to give a shout out to the gradient and
Yeah,
level name there.
this is
Classic
the
Flash gradient.
classic Flash Chrome gradient. It's one of the built-in.
There's like three classic gradients. There's that one, just the blue and red to black, and then the rainbow.
I actually like this part of this game here, where it
Yeah,
switches.
this part feels like an actual game. The other part was kind of meh.
Yeah.
This part takes like actual skill.
So actually, I gotta remember how to play it here. Oops, I turned the sound off.
Not like
Oh, it has a music toggle. That's high tech. There we go. And then I gotta click on them, right? Wait, how do I shoot? Oh, I hit space. Man, we were easily entertained back then, huh?
I hear you giggling. You still are.
Oh no, I died. I got,
I actually hate the spacebar as a gameplay button. That's my pet peeve. Anytime I see
Yeah.
it as a spacebar.
what would you rather it
Especially
be?
back then, because it would cause something weird to happen to your browser every now and then.
I hate it so much. People still use it. Space to jump. No, it's a big rectangle thing. No.
All right, next game. Let's
So
see.
you don't play Counter Strike, do you?
So I think this is going to be one common theme that we talk about is how many genres of games did Flash create? Like how many genres started as Flash games, right? So one genre I'm about to load up here is the escape room.
Escape Room, yes.
And this is by Sean Tanner, aka Afro Ninja on Newgrounds, and he sort of made a bunch of these little escape games. And we're in 2003 now.
Oh, I remember that guy. I used to live with us.
Never.
I live with all of Newgrounds, apparently.
Spooky. And we got the text fields here. You can type
Very important that you put.
for 1900. And yeah, I mean, these escape room games.
Is that your birthday?
Yep, it's my real birthday. I mean, this is the kind of thing that Flash was good at, right? You could just open the program up and draw art really fast and get something moving on the screen, without much effort. And you compare that, there was nothing else really around at the time for someone to make little games like this.
It's an evolution of like the Stone Age. Like people
Yeah.
kept making that stuff because it worked.
And yeah, you think about how many of these escape room games there are now, like both in real life escape rooms and, Escape Room Simulator on Steam and all of these the other games on iPad. These genres started, with Flash games, with teenagers, experimenting, making games for fun in their spare time.
I feel like this genre is a lot harder to make than people think.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like that with like Friday Night Funkin' mods and stuff. They're like, I want to do that, and then they make a lot of shitty mods.
Yeah, I mean,
we're not there yet. We're not to that time period yet. But I'm just like saying these are hard games to make.
yeah, I mean, and
Somebody wants to
This
make one
is
of these
pretty
games.
much the original Friday Night Funkin' right here.
well, that's sort of what made Flash great, I think, in that it was very easy for people to open up and learn and experiment, right? Like, people made a lot of crap, but there was a lot of, people were learning and making new things all the time, and that's how we got a lot of these, like, cool little experimental games.
And and Newgrounds was popping up big back then too. We had like the forums, we had IRC chat rooms, so we were all bragging about what we were doing in these games and sharing and
Mhm.
learning from each other at the same time. So it was almost like a little university happening at this point too.
So I'm gonna jump to another game here. This is gonna show off like the fan games that the Flash scene spawned. And this one's really,
Flash song.
yeah, this one's super popular.
Does not feel like it should have been an old Flash game. It's so tight.
And I think this shows off another good feature that they added in Flash 5, which was hit test.
Yeah.
And for anyone who doesn't know, hit test basically lets you test if a point is inside one of the shape, inside a vector art. And that let people make these platform games because it's all just using hit test. So when it's testing if Sonic's on the ground, it's just hit testing against the art. And so you could literally just...
For comparison, when I made the first mini putt game, that was in an old version of Flash. I want to say it was Flash 4 even.
Mhm.
You had to... no, it might have been Flash. Yeah, Flash 4. You had to actually program where all your rectangle points were for anything that had collision because Flash didn't know where it was built in.
Right, so you were writing your own collision detection, basically.
Yeah. Not only writing your own collision detection, but like physically writing variables for every corner and every rectangle.
But now with hit test, it was, it's pretty easy. Like you didn't really have to know math. You could just draw the level, do some hit tests, and you would have a platform game, right?
And they had a shape flag variant too, so like any shape you could detect if you're in it or not.
And basically, almost every Flash platform game you would have played on Newgrounds used this feature, right? And the fact that they, managed to put that in right away in Flash 5 and actually make it fast, because actually that's the problem we're having with Ruffle right now, is making that fast is difficult. It was really impressive that Macromedia snuck that in there. I've actually never really played through this too much, even though we've been like getting it to work in Ruffle. This actually plays really nicely for like a little fan game.
It feels like an actual Game Boy Advance game.
Yeah. Now, it's obviously using the art from, like Sonic Advance.
Yeah.
So definitely...
Do you
The
think
fact
like
that
at
this
this,
game hasn't been taken down yet says a lot about Sega.
Oh, I can't get over these spikes.
do you think at this point, like Macromedia is realizing that people are making games with their stuff, and they're like, all right, we gotta start actually making this like a developer-friendly platform?
That's why they added hit tests and stuff like that.
Mhm.
They saw where it was going, that people were making all these games and stuff. They really did cement themselves as like something that had to be in the browser. You had to have this plugin.
Yeah. No, that's really
I bet
cool.
you they could have sold that to a big company for a lot of money. I bet you.
A really shitty company.
Okay, let's look at one more game here from this era. Actually, let's look at Dad and Me. So we looked at Samurai Asshole earlier, and we saw like how janky it was. And now that we're in the Flash 5, Flash 6 era, let's see what Tom can make as far as beat 'em ups.
This is like a really flashy game. Like, I mean, I know it's
Oh,
Flash,
yeah.
but it's a very like tight game.
Pun intended. I actually like this like scrolling sky background here. I never really noticed that before. And you can see there's a lot of raster art used in that menu too.
Now going back to the fact that we played these on old computers, when this came out, I could not
Oh,
play
yeah.
it. I
Yeah.
could not play it. It was terrible.
But it has a pretty high frame rate too. It's running at looks like 40 frames a second or so.
Well, when you're Tom Fault, you can afford a good computer.
Yeah, I mean, you had a fucking Neo Geo. I was still on Nintendo.
Right?
So one cool trick that Tom did there is the music kicked in with the guitar. Tom did that by layering the tracks. So it's basically always playing the guitar track. But then when you get the guitar track's muted, but when you get to this boss, it actually fades in the guitar track. So I always thought that was kind of clever.
We're not to blow too much smoke up Tom's ass, but one thing he did is he always brought as much pump as he could to a Flash game in every generation he did it. And that was super inspirational to everybody else. And if I sound like I'm yelling, it's because the music's really loud.
Sorry, I have it turned down for the stream, but I don't think it over Discord. It
I
really.
apologize even more for yelling at YouTube.
All right, let's close this up. All right. So that was the era, we'll say, up until maybe like Flash 7, right?
Yeah, right.
And then if we go forward from there, you know, Flash 8 comes out, I think about 2004, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you called this,
Into the Silver Age.
yeah, you called this the Silver Age. So do you want to explain that a little bit?
So the Golden Age, basically, like we said, that was when everybody had the tools to make really great stuff. The Silver Age is a continuation of that, but all of a sudden it becomes a little more commercial where people are actually making money now. There's sponsorship models, there's advertising in games, there's all sorts of ways you can make money. You're getting paid. Like, I talked to Tyler Glale not that long ago on the Newgrounds podcast, and he was telling us, like, yeah, I'm like this 14-year-old kid getting like thousands of dollars every month. It was just nuts. And so now all of a sudden, not only do you have hobbyists doing it, you have professionals doing it. People who weren't making these games before are like, ooh, I could do that. I know how to program, or I'm good at art. And in
Everyone
Newgrounds
was
in
making their
particular,
animation studios. Everyone had an animation studio.
yeah.
Everyone.
But,
had
and then
an
with Newgrounds in particular, everybody was also collaborating. So you had every part of the team you needed, and everybody wanted to get in on this. So there were so many great teams. Lewis was part of one or two, I believe. I worked with Mind Chamber quite a bit. We did some cool stuff, but like there were so many dream teams out there, and a lot of good stuff came out of it.
So at this point in time, the websites started to appear like flashgamelicense.com, and that's where people,
Yes.
you know,
Oh yeah, things went viral too. Yeah.
so
People would steal games from Newgrounds or whatever site you put a game on. They would just straight up steal it.
so what was the process like if you were trying to get a game sponsored at this point in time?
It was really Wild West for most of it. Later on, there was a website called Flash Game License that came out that kind of acted as a mediary and took little commissions on it. Before that, though, you would just make a game and you would write a letter to whoever you thought would sponsor it, and like an email or something like, "Hey, I got this game. You interested in sponsoring it?" And 9 times out of 10, they'd say yes, depending on who it was. Armor Games was huge for that. They made a lot of money for a lot of people. They sponsored, God, I couldn't even tell you how many games, but they made a lot of careers too. Um, Newgrounds got in on that. They sponsored quite a bit of stuff, but it wasn't to the degree of the sites that were actually using that sponsorship to build their brands. In fact, that's kind of how I got hired at Newgrounds. Just a quick short story there. When I made a game called Elky Kong 2, I had Tom sponsor it. And I asked him, are you tracking this to see where it's going around the web, how much the Newgrounds logo is getting clicked? Like, do you know if you're actually making your money back on this? He had no fucking clue what he was spending his money on. So I made a little tracking tool for that one game just so he would feel like, because I don't like making people pay for shit that's worthless. I was like, I want to prove that this is worth the money you gave me. And within a couple of weeks of seeing that, he was hooked, and he's like, "Hey, how much would you charge to make this for Newgrounds?" And that's pretty much since then I've been working for Newgrounds.
That's cool. I never heard that story before, really.
Well, now you know. And then Mikey was around, and I made him work on that stuff too.
Good times.
Good times.
So let's see, which game should I bring up here? Ooh, I like this. How about Miami Shark? You like that game, right?
Miami Shark. Yeah.
Sorry, guys, this might be a little loud. All right. So I always liked these games made by Mozland.
Wheezy Mozland.
Spicy, right?
Yeah, Weissy. I think Weissy's his name, and then Mozland is his company, right?
Yep.
I
think it's his last name too, though.
Oh, is it? I didn't know that. And he always made these like really wacky, you know, like just funny games that you could send to your friends.
Always polished too, and like over the top. They felt like anything that would fit into like an old school Japanese arcade. He was basically like making what you would call like really high quality mobile games back then in Flash.
Yeah, I mean, this is like really nicely polished. I guess one thing I should point out there that's new in like Flash 8 is they added the blur filters. So you can see that the shark getting like blurry as it dives and stuff. Yeah, yeah.
So you can cache the backgrounds even though they're attachments.
Um, that screen.
The
So,
wonderful thing about this game is it did implement the metal system I worked on.
oh yeah,
Not
with
in the first game necessarily, but one of the ones that you had to get them all because all the vehicles and stuff you wanted to pull down, and the metals basically told you what you could kill in this game, making it even more replayable.
man, these games are so fun.
Man, I
Um,
wish my computer could run it like this back then.
yeah, it's funny. Yeah, like we forget how bad the games ran back then because now they just run great.
Oh no, I will never forget.
So here's another. I feel like a genre that Flash created.
Oh yeah, toss games.
Yeah, is that what you call them? Toss games? Like, what do you even call this genre?
Yeah, we've always called them toss games.
I see.
I know there were precursors to these before Flash, where you'd shoot things out of catapults, but they were never refined, and they were never
Yeah,
must-play games.
I
They
feel
were always
like
experimental.
Flash definitely like made these genres what they are. I think.
Yeah.
We always called it the toss the turtle. No matter what. It's kind of like
Uh,
Euro Retro style. It just becomes a Euro
It's a
Retro
toss the
style.
turtle game. Yep. What's funny is Kitten Cannon came out before this. That was actually the first toss
mm,
game run for you. But this one, it was felt like you actually had more control over what happened. Kitten Cannon, it was like you launched the cat and whatever happened happened. This, you can shoot the turtle and launch it up in the air more. You can collect stuff. You know, there's a lot going on here.
oh, look, this game has medals too.
Yes.
So I guess that's something we should talk about. Like at this point in time, like all these games started adding social features. Like the iPhone comes out in like,
A lot of sites.
yeah, 2006. There's like Facebook. Everyone's trying to add all these social features. So do you think that was like a good thing for Flash that they were trying to, mimic all?
I think it was fine. Yeah, because there was a lot of sites like Congregate came out and they had where you put a game on and you could build in your scores and they would actually have special challenges on their website. We had the medal system. The nice thing about social games though is it really opened up these Flash games to a whole other audience. Like
Hmm.
you only ever played it on Newgrounds. Obviously, you know who's playing it. You know, it's a younger audience. It's an edgier audience. Now all of a sudden, like your mom's playing stuff that people you know made. You know, it's kind of cool and weird.
So I guess the other thing we should talk about at this point in time is that this is around when Adobe bought Macromedia, right? I think Adobe bought Macromedia in 2005.
Yep.
And like, what do you think? What effect do you think that had on Flash? Do you think that was like a good thing or a bad thing, or?
I was pretty neutral on it
Hmm.
originally because like we all knew Adobe as the guys that made Photoshop and Premiere and all these big league tools, and we were like, okay, this is actually kind of exciting because they can add like a lot of this really polished stuff to Flash and make it amazing. And we didn't realize they were just buying it because of the fact it was installed everywhere and it was easy money, you know.
Hmm.
So we thought they were actually going to put love into it, make it this must-have tool. And I mean, it's still used today. Like you know, everybody still uses Animate for animation. It's used in production studios to this day. It's still used for some UI and video games, things like that. So I mean, they clearly did put some love into it. But on the other hand, they didn't give a fuck about the independent scene that didn't make them any money. If they weren't making money off it, it wasn't worth investing in. Where with Macromedia, you know, as soon as they saw people were making games, oh, let's add hit test. Oh,
Hmm.
let's make sure keyboard inputs right. And I feel like when Adobe bought it, that type of care completely went out the window.
Yeah, that's a bummer. Um, so I guess the other thing is that at this point in time, Flash 9, Flash CS3 is coming out, and that's when they introduced ActionScript 3. Um, and at least in my mind, they sort of forked the community between ActionScript 2 and 3, right? So ActionScript 3 was like, quite different. You had to relearn a lot of things. It was a little bit harder to do some things that were easy in ActionScript 2. Like, what were your thoughts, when ActionScript 3 came around?
Hello, hello. Hello.
Oh,
Can you
hey,
hear me?
standby. What's up?
Sorry to keep you waiting. I was completely AFK.
Oh
doing
no,
some stuff around the house.
are live on YouTube.
Oh, excellent.
So you're just joining
Okay,
us
cool.
here.
Well, in that case, I'll leave you to it.
All right,
Yeah, I
thanks.
think the headphones just died.
By the
One
way,
sec.
I turned Josh up. People were saying he was a little bit too loud, too low. So you should be able to hear him now. Did you hear what I asked, Josh? Just a second ago?
No, I had to switch my speakers real quick. My headphones just died.
No worries.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying this is about the time when ActionScript 3 came out as well with Flash CS3. And
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, did you have any thoughts when ActionScript 3 came out? Like, what did you think of it at that point in time?
It took me a while to warm up to it. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to switch devices. Yeah, it took me a while to warm up to it because it was the first time I had ever worked with a strict language. And for those of you who don't program, a strict language means if you create a variable and it's a string, it's always a string, and you have to tell it it's a string when you create it, things like that. In ActionScript 2, you could go willy-nilly. There was no rules. You could change variables to whatever you want. You didn't have to predefine everything. You didn't have to import the parts of Flash you used. In ActionScript 3, if you wanted to use certain mouse stuff, you actually had to import that stuff, which was smart because when you compile the game, it only loads the code you need to use instead of everything Flash can possibly do. But when you go from a version of Flash where you didn't have to do any of that, and you've never really worked that way, it's very off-putting. And that's actually probably the number one reason to this day Tom still makes his console games and Flash games in ActionScript 2, because it is a very big leap. Like, I totally get why. On the other hand, it also added a lot of power. Your games were super optimized. You could do all sorts of cool things with like bitmap and effects and stuff like that you couldn't get away with in ActionScript 2, that was limited to like simple blurs and tints and things like that. So there was a lot of cool stuff, and it ran really fast. So a lot of the really good games that were coming out in ActionScript 3 were blowing the ActionScript 2 ones away. A lot of people were submitting tech demos that weren't even really games, but they were just like, wow. And people would take those ideas and turn them into games. So it was definitely revolutionary.
Yeah, I mean, I felt the same way. Like, being a programmer, I loved the power, I loved the new features, but I feel like it sort of divided the community at the time a little bit. So, you couldn't just take your ActionScript 2 code and run it as ActionScript 3. It wouldn't work. So you kind of had to learn a new way to do things. And actually, I think that first release of Flash Player 9 in Flash CS3, ActionScript 3 was kind of broken in a lot of ways. Like, it broke a lot of the workflows that people were using in ActionScript 2.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that really, it kind of separated the scene between like the hardcore programmers and then the people that were just kind of, trying to make experimental games and like little games for fun. And I think that kind of, it lost a little bit of its charm at that point.
You also got like a lot of ActionScript 3 games, like you said, they were made specifically by programmers and stuff, and you could tell because they didn't feel as creative. They felt very technical. They felt very, I don't know, for lack of a term, they didn't have that visual polish.
Right.
Even though it was more capable of that, and after a while, it kind of all came together. But yeah, early AS3, you could definitely tell the difference.
I feel like when Adobe bought Macromedia, that's when it started to feel very corporate, for lack of a better word. Like, they wanted Flash to control the world. So it started to like spread a little bit thin, where, they weren't just focusing on, like little games and animations, like you said. They were, trying to get Flash running on every device in existence. Like, it was supposed to replace
Adobe
Java.
Air came out and all that. So you could compile to anything. And they were really hoping that they would take over the mobile market when that was fledgling. Steve Jobs was like,
And just to give an example of some of the power that like ActionScript 3 and some of these new versions gave us, I'm going to show Cannibalt here.
The interesting thing about Cannibalt is it was not built using the Flash IDE, I don't believe. I think that was one of the first ones that was done in pure code with a Flash compiler.
And this game's by Adam Saltzman is the programmer, and he made a game framework called Flixel. So already we can start to see like the divide between the programmers that are making their own engines now and trying to avoid like the Flash environment a little bit. So this Flixel engine that he made, it's actually pretty clever because it's just drawing bitmaps to the screen, you know, almost like you were making a real game, so to speak. And this only became possible because of ActionScript 3, right? ActionScript 3 finally gave the speed and the power to be able to do this kind of thing.
You could do it in ActionScript 2, but you had to definitely be a technical wizard to do it. And if you're a technical wizard, why wouldn't you use the newest, you know?
Right. I guess this brings up another genre that's like a real staple of Flash games. It's the Infinite Runner.
This and what was the one with the dinosaurs? Oh, Dino Run. Dino Run was another good one that came out early on.
Yeah, and this Flixel framework was, you know, so popular that it still lives on today. And Hacks Flixel is usually what it's called now because people use it in Hacks. And that's
pretty much the exact same framework. It's evolved, but now it's in the Hacks programming language. And people are using it to this day to make HTML5 games.
But yeah, it's Friday Night Funkin'.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, me neither. But I think this was like still the good era of people like still having the Flash spirit, you know, making, you know, fun little games. That
yeah,
you know,
commercial. There's no ads in it.
Yeah, you play for like 10 minutes, be done with it.
Yeah, I think that was my favorite thing about the Flash games too. Is they were just things you could hop on and play, and with Newgrounds in particular, you could play like 18 different games during your lunch break, and they were always fun. You know, you didn't have to get invested into one. And the funny thing is, like, the people that loved the Newgrounds games at the time are also the ones that are hardcore gamers 90% of the time, who make fun of people for playing mobile games because they're stupid casuals. But they played all this shit. Don't let them fool you.
So I think around this time too is when, you know, after Adobe bought Macromedia, I feel like they were adding a lot of features to Flash, and I feel like some of the features were kind of half-baked, in that they looked good, like if you were trying to make a list of new features for the software, but they actually weren't that useful.
Yeah, they got spread thin at times too. I think like this, they'd introduce something and it didn't work quite right, and they would never quite fix it.
Yeah.
And this, like you said, they were working towards going from making just silly browser content to they wanted it on everything. So they're trying to do a self-contained development framework and using a platform that everybody knew as a browser-only thing. And I don't think they managed it very well at all.
Yeah, a little too much going on there. But I will say, every once in a while there was a game that really used these new features in a really clever way. And I like this game, Closure.
Oh yeah, I forgot about this one.
Because this used the feature that was basically a big deal for like one Flash version called Pixel Bender. And you know, it's basically what we call like a shader nowadays in games, but Tyler used it to like sort of do these lighting effects.
I was going to use it in one game to make like a heat wave effect in a background.
And yeah, I always thought this game was like really cool, and this sort of shows off like the sort of art house style of Flash game where they were trying to do something like kind of clever and experimental. For anyone who hasn't played this game before, the whole shtick is that you can only collide where there's light. So wherever there's not light, you just fall through the floor. So you have to carry these lights around with you. Yeah, this is like another thing where, you know, someone was on the cutting edge of using like the newest Flash features, and it let them do lots of cool things.
And it's a mechanic I've seen in other games, but this is where it started. So.
Right. And yeah, this game won all kinds of awards, I'm pretty sure.
You can get the full version on Steam if you ever want to play it.
So I guess that brings us to, I actually like that you called it the Dark Age.
The Dark Ages.
Of Flash here. Starting around 2012. And why did it start in 2012, Josh?
Well, I don't know 2012 is the specific date. That's just when I kind of noticed it became the Dark Age. Around this time, you know, obviously smartphones are becoming more affordable. Everybody has them. Steve Jobs had written his infamous letter about why Flash should die. The Apple devices no longer supported it, and everybody wanted to play casual stuff on their mobile devices, and the promise was HTML5 would be the way to do that in the browser.
Mhm.
So people started shying away from Flash. That includes all the people that were putting money into sponsorships, advertising. So the money making engine for making Flash games was going off the rail. It was going into the station. It was going to be put down. They're going to shoot Thomas the Tank Engine in the face, and that gravy train was gone. People were still making games for fun in Flash. Obviously, they're still doing it today. You still see it,
Mhm.
but it was not the big scene, and it never would be that big scene again. Not to say that web-based games went away. It's just people started switching tools, and other tools were popping up like Construct and a bunch of other ones I can't even think of off the top of my head. Game developer was or game. What the hell was it? Not
Game Maker. That's what you're thinking of?
no. There was another one. It was similar to Construct. It didn't last very long. Game Maker was getting popular too for different reasons because people were like, "Oh, if I can make a game on mobile, I'm just going to skip the web altogether."
Right.
Unity was getting popular. Unity actually had a plugin for a while, so they had a little tiny niche where they were had a little breakout on the web, and then that died. But then they made it so it worked, and kind of. But yeah, the larger point was that all these other technologies were available, and the overall reasoning for using Flash was kind of drying up. So there was really not much point in it. So you didn't see a lot of new Flash stuff coming out. You saw plenty of games coming out inspired by all those Flash games. Probably a few sequels. I know some people even made Flash versions and HTML5 versions of the games they were doing so they could spread better. But at this point, yeah, the idea of making Flash was kind of like, why? Why would I? There's no point. Even me, I quit making Flash games at this point. It's to the point where when you asked me about doing this panel, I went through this period from 2012 to like 2020 trying to find my favorite Flash games. And I'm like, oh, I love this game. Oh, that's not Flash. Oh, this game is, no, that's not Flash either. I had a really hard time finding Flash games I loved in that time.
Well, it's funny because I had the same experience because I saw that you didn't find any Flash games. I was like, there's got to be something good from around here. And it was really struggling to find some stuff. But yeah, I mean, I would say the big turning point was that Steve Jobs letter, which came out in like 2011, maybe 2010, where Steve Jobs basically said, we're not going to support Flash on the iPhone ever. And at that point, the writing was kind of on the wall.
And he put out the narrative that it was insecure and it was kind of like get all your device, like a lot of false information there. Like yes, sometimes Flash did have vulnerabilities, but what piece of software never had a vulnerability, including Apple software?
I mean, like you can argue back and forth like what the motivation was, just because he wanted the Apple Store to be big.
I think there was also pushback on the advertising because back then advertising had gotten super obnoxious because they were all flash. They all had fucking audio in your face, flashing lights. And I think people were sick of seeing that. So like getting rid of flash, like, hey, maybe I'll get rid of this shit too. And it kind of did.
Yeah, that is true. I guess you actually brought up Unity, and Unity started to get big at this time too. And yeah, I feel like, with Flash on the downswing, and then Unity sort of filled that niche, for mobile, and everyone's sort of playing on their iPhones now. Yeah, people weren't really playing games in the browser much anymore.
No,
I think at this point in time.
No.
It's actually kind of funny you mentioned that Unity had a plugin. Do you remember there was like a little period of time where Unity would actually publish to a Flash file?
Vaguely, yeah, and it didn't work too good.
Yeah, it was maybe for like a year. And actually, I don't know, you might not remember this too, but what happened is that Adobe sort of got upset about it, and they were actually going to charge people a license fee if they were going to use the feature that Unity was using to publish the Flash.
Which is funny because they had a open to the public compiler that anybody could use free, and they didn't care about that.
Yeah. And yeah, when Adobe tried to like pull that thing where like, okay, if you're using these premium features, you have to pay us royalties, the community kind of like turned on them and they backpedaled on that. But there was this weird period of time where, Flash was still relevant, but it was like on the downswing. And it was kind of hard to find some good Flash games from this period, but I will show a couple here. Here's probably one of the more popular games on Newgrounds, actually. is Madness Project Nexus, and that this is from about 2012. And
Yeah, right around there.
And you can see,
you could even argue this was part of the last hurrah of the Silver Age, because they were working on it.
yeah, for a long time. And yeah, I kind of agree. Like, this came out right in 2012, so yeah, this is probably right on the edge of like.
We also did just launch like one of our big updates on Newgrounds. That was the last redesign we did before the current one. So there was still like some excitement in the community for doing this stuff at that time too.
And this game actually shows off another thing in that how many people sort of got their start with their professional career in making Flash games. Like now, you know, Swain and Crinkles have made Project Nexus 2 that's on Steam, like a legit game that you can buy now. And so many developers started making Flash games and then transitioned to make it their career.
Yep. Yeah, I don't think we would have the independent game scene we have without Flash. There's no way.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. This game, I like how this game, it uses the drawing API to draw a lot of these like bullets on the screen, like the tracers.
Yep.
It's really cool. So also at this point in time, I guess one other thing that they added is that they started to add 3D support to Flash. Like you could actually use your video card. In the past, Flash would always just do software rendering, meaning it was using your processor to draw everything. But then they sort of saw the writing on the wall that, okay, Unity's getting big, people want 3D games, we can use we can use the video card. So I was actually like trying to find a 3D game that was written in Flash, and I actually couldn't find any.
A lot of people leveraged the GPU for 2D. They used a framework called Starling, which was similar to what Flixel does and things like that. But
so I've got some Starling games here.
Oh, sweet.
Let's see if I can bring it up here.
I was playing with that around this time, actually, and there was a point where Adobe Air would let you export to Android and stuff. And I had some really neat demos on it. Like, if Apple would have let it compile to Apple, there's no reason it couldn't. In fact, they do let you do some of that now because Matt Rojnak has got his whole series of games on Apple, and it's all Flash. It's all compiled through Adobe Air. So
I guess that brings up another question: is do you think that, like, what did you think about Adobe Air? Like, do you think Adobe, didn't go hard enough on like supporting games on the mobile platforms, or do you think?
I think they saw the writing on the wall. I think they saw that Apple was always going to push back on that because that would mean that there was always a potential for every game they make to also be available on the web, and Apple wanted the App Store to be the only place to get games, which is weird because to this day, Apple hasn't really made games a great priority, even though they have a goddamn gaming service. It's never felt like a priority. But I don't know. I felt like they leaned on that bullshit excuse of how insecure Flash is, but any software gets updates and security holes get filled. It was never a problem. Adobe Air gave everybody the ability to compile and run on pretty much anything, and like it ran great. Like I had this old Google Nexus tablet, not a powerhouse by any means, and I was playing demos I made where shit was happening faster than it did on my computer, and that was with limited processing power. So I don't know how they pulled it off, but I mean, there was definitely a lot of potential for that, and you can use it now. It seems to work fine on all the app stores now that you have to go through the whole gatekeeping process of getting your game in the store and all that. There doesn't seem to be an issue. But I don't know that Adobe saw that it was worth the fight, so that's probably why they didn't really invest that hard in it. They definitely made the move to, we just want to go to subscription services and we want to make perpetual money. And I think that's where they are now. And I think that's probably around the time that plan came up.
So here's a game that used Starling from this area of time. So this is a Flash game, but it's using my video card to render everything. And actually, you can like immediately see like it has these cool visual effects. But sort of it, like, at least for me personally, like obviously it's really cool as a programmer to be able to like access the video card and use all these features. This game's Incredipede, by the way. It was, for me, it was like what the point of Flash wasn't really there anymore. If I'm using like this external game engine, this external game framework to write my game, like the Flash player is just sort of, you know, a vessel to deliver that. It's not really necessary anymore, right? And I sort of like feel like that lost some of the charm of Flash, where you could just open it up and, you know, just scribble on the screen. And
you're not even really using the Flash IDE anymore for a lot of these games. You're just writing in pure code.
You're just doing pure code. Actually, this points out like another thing that was really big around this period of time was like the physics game. Like there were lots of physics games that were using like Box 2D and Starling to you know, make these little physics puzzles. Actually, I believe some versions of Angry Birds actually use Starling as well.
Yeah, the very first web versions did.
So I think I'll show off one more game here. Let's see. And I think
the biggest reason people use that stuff in that point in time was actually to make stuff for Facebook.
Right. I mean, that brings up like another thing is that like at this point in time, everything was all about, you know, engagement. Like I feel like it was commoditized, like it was just a commodity, like getting people's attention. Like this is where you had to like check in every day and like click on your Facebook feed.
You go to one web page all day, and that was the idea, is keep you there as long as you can. Web 2.
Yeah, keep you occupied. And it actually brings up like this last genre of game that I think really started as Flash games, which were like the idle games.
Oh yeah.
So here we got Clicker Heroes, which I think, like, I actually looked this up, and there are still on Steam today. There were 3,000 people playing this, you know, today. Now, granted, they might not be playing it because it's an idle game, but the game is open on their computer, right?
Yeah, they have an auto clicker turned on.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just like another genre that started in Flash. Like so far, we have like the idle games, we have the escape room games, the infinite runner, the physics puzzles. Like all of these different genres of games exist pretty much because of Flash, I think.
And you know what these genres really are, right? It's you distill one part of gameplay from a more popular, larger game type. Like the infinite runner is just the running part of a platformer, right? The clicker is just the grinding part of an RPG without the RPG.
Yeah. I've
So
said
if you take one mechanic from a bigger game and focus on it, you can make a whole genre.
This is kind of depressing now.
Oh, Luce is back. What's up with this?
It's a bummer of a note to end it on.
Well, I think
Just focus on one feature.
I think that's cool. For me, it's not just like taking one feature. It's like the mashup of taking something that exists and looking at it a different way.
Yeah, you focus on that one
Yeah.
feature and what can it be on its own? What can I add to it to make it something new? Tower defense is another one. Like
Yeah.
tower defense was born out of RTS games where you would build, walls and turrets and stuff to keep the invading army away from your base while you finish the game. And somebody turned around and said, that part of the game's pretty fun. Let's make that just the game. And that's another one that was born in Flash.
So speaking of tower defense, let's talk a little bit about the future now. So Flash's end of life was in 2020, right? So
Yeah,
Flash
it's
player,
dead.
it's dead. It's not built into any browsers anymore. So what's its legacy? What's its future? And it's not like web gaming is totally dead, right? There's still new games coming out on Newgrounds all the time in HTML5, but all of this classic content, I'm hoping will still exist thanks to my Flash emulator Ruffle. Like if you play lots of these old games on Ruffle, they work today, and we're hoping to support more and more. And also there's the Flashpoint project, which is basically a massive archive of like every Flash game you could think of, every web game really. And they're doing a great job of keeping all that content alive. And then I think the spirit of Flash games, of being these sort of experimental things, still lives on places like itch.io that are still making really cool games.
And you've got frameworks like GameMaker and stuff that have gone back to making it easy to develop in your one editor. I'm not a fan of it, but you know, people like it. People like it. Unity, you know, the tools are there again. Where you're like, if you're willing to learn the tools, and they're not as easy to learn as Flash was, but on the flip side, the game engines are built in now. You don't have to write your game engines from
It's
scratch
true.
anymore. But like if you're into game development and you wanna learn it, like web-based gaming is still probably the best way to do it because
Mhm.
it's an instant audience. You just got to send people a link and poof, they're at your game. Sites like Newgrounds still around with a pretty decent player base where you can test your metal, you know, and get reviews and criticisms. So I don't know that web gaming is going anywhere. I wish Flash would die, but somebody keeps bringing it back.
Well, let's brings up maybe the final game we'll show off. In that I didn't make Ruffle to help people make new Flash stuff, but for some reason people are making new Flash stuff because of Ruffle, which is great, but it's also kind of terrifying to me. But I want to show off one little game here because we brought up the tower defense, which is another genre that helped that Flash helped spawn. So you want to tell us a little bit about this game, Lewis? Is Lewis still here, or did he?
Oh God. I fucking hate tower defense games.
Tower defense.
And no, Bombtoon's like, let's make a tower defense game. And I just I quit like early in the project because I was like, this is not fun. I don't find these games fun. I hate these games. I never found these games fun.
They're actually like hard. They're difficult for me. Like I was never good at them.
It's actually, yeah, it's interesting to watch people play it because it's like you realize how many different styles of like, how people play. Like the ones I've seen is like people are lean heavily on the tankman upgrade or whatever you want to call it, the installation. Like I never use them at all. I find them useless, but I also find like the voice is just too much every time hearing Jeff. That's why I don't use them. But
I
I've seen,
don't want Jeff yelling at me the whole time.
I've seen like a whole playthrough of just Tankman the whole time. I was actually relieved, like by the near the end of the game, like the Tankmen become totally useless. So they like we wean off of that particular feature of the game.
I
but it
used
was
to
good.
in the last level.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
It was no, it was fun to make. Like once I got like into my my groove, it was like we started cranking them out really quickly, and we are working on an I don't know what you want to call it, like an add-on to it.
Really? Oh man, I can't wait to play that.
Yeah, probably Halloween, I think. Oh, there's Jeff.
Did
Actually-
Nick want to do this specifically because it's like such a Flash-centric genre?
I think he just enjoyed the genre in general, and he's dreamed of doing it. And I think the Newgrounds lore like lends himself really easily to it. And I do agree with that, especially like the Tankman stuff, where I mean they're Tankmen. It's like it kind of lends itself to it.
Promotion, big boy.
And Jeff was actually a really good sport about like doing all these voices at the very end. Like this was like literally the last piece of it. I was like worried that Jeff would be like, "No, fuck off! I'm not gonna do all these voices," and he actually did a ton of them.
All right.
So did you play a lot of tower defense games for research?
No, I just went off of what Nick told me to do.
It's like I hate tower defense, so I'm just gonna do everything I hate.
But I mean, I think it was good that I didn't play a lot of tower defense games because like there was some ideas that I had that he didn't think that necessarily fit into like a tower defense genre, but they work out pretty well. I'm trying to think of one.
And stay down.
I want to say like the van, like the annoying vans that you have.
Oh, I hated those. Those were the worst.
Yeah, I was like, what about if there's just this thing that just like is unstoppable and it just totally ruins everything?
Oh, so it's your fault.
I actually had even more aggressive ideas where like there's some sort of enemy that actually starts ruining your installations. Nick eventually just was like, all right, how about just like freezing your stuff temporarily? How about just not ruining people's work? So that was fun. I think my favorite level in this game was the Madness one. The boss for that was cool. Where like the open spots become like opportunities for the boss to raise zombies. Like I thought that was a neat idea. Where you really want to use up all the slots so that the boss can't use the empty slots to create enemies that come running out to the portal.
Yeah, I did like the boss battles in this game. I thought they were really clever. I like the fighting Tom, the floating Tom head at the end too.
Yeah, we had to self-plug our stuff eventually, so that's...
So, did you
good.
make all of this pixel art directly in Flash too?
Yeah, I did. I made it in Flash MX 2004. We're going back now.
That's still run in Windows 10?
Nice.
I guess so.
We're going back to 2004 again.
Threat eliminated.
So,
It's a really annoying style to make, though, I must admit. So it's like a 1 pixel stroke, which is totally unreasonable. I don't recommend it.
That's how you do all your little animations you post on.
I don't
usually
know. I don't know how you
I
do
do
that
them
in
on
Flash.
twos. I do it on twos. Rarely do I do it on one because it doesn't make so much difference at all. So
No.
I love this game.
So yeah, now I showed off Lewis's game. I'm going to show off your game now, Josh.
This
It's
is
got a wiener.
the hot dog with the butthole.
Yeah. That's not a butthole, Lewis.
I know.
He has a completely separate, unique butt.
So what was it like making a Flash game in the year of our Lord 2022?
This one I actually had fun with. The one I made the previous year, I could have shot myself because I went way overboard on the engine. This one, it's a throwback. It's a simple point and click. I mean, it's not all button based, obviously. There's a lot more under the hood, but I had wanted to do a game with Swain way back. It was called Drunky Island. It was a Monkey Island spoof, and it was like 3 characters. And so I actually had the rough concept of a point and click adventure game engine already done back then. And I just kind of dusted off the idea. And my friend Sam, she had been wanting to make this stupid game about a sausage forever. Her original one was going to be like a freaking, like an actual platform fighting game or something. I don't even remember what her plan was. I was like, let's just make a point and click and use your stupid sausage and have them escape the driver. But this goes back to like getting creative too, not just like with the visuals and stuff, but like the audio. I'm very proud of the audio in this game. There's a whole movie that goes on in the background, and it progresses as you progress in the game, and it's all seamless.
Actually, I never really noticed that. I did notice the audio playing, but I never really like listened to it.
Yeah, it's very subtle unless someone points it out.
Yeah,
If anybody's interested in actually learning about this game, we did do a whole playthrough thing on YouTube. Just find it. It's on my user page on Newgrounds, I think. But you'll get all the details. But yeah, working on it was a lot of
about
fun.
that movie part.
Yeah. If you beat the game, that's another fun thing. If you beat the game and continue, you can just walk over and listen to the whole thing.
So the other thing I noticed is like the frame rate is so smooth. Was it like kind of nice? Like we were just talking earlier about how bad Flash used to run.
Yeah, it's nice because like with Ruffle, you're leveraging modern computing. So, and it's all raster art, so there's nothing slowing it down really. It's all pretty much all running on the GPU.
Yeah, I really like this game, Josh. It was a lot of fun. All right, I think
Writing it was a lot of fun because I wrote pretty much the whole story and like 90% of the dialogue. A lot of it's based on conversations we had with the developers, but it was fun to write.
that's cool. Do you think you guys will keep making Flash games in the future?
That's probably a big no. I mean, I say it every time there's a Flash jam. The last couple of years, I was like, I'm never doing a Flash game again. I'm never doing a Flash game again. And then I did this one, but
So-
I don't know that I'm going to go back to the Flash well anymore. I mean, it was fun. It was cool.
Mhm.
And I'm proud of the game I made, especially the sausage game. Roguebot Rumble, I could take it or leave it, but I was really proud of sausage game. To the point we actually are planning on making a bigger game at some point, but
Oh, wow.
probably not going to be in Flash.
What do you think you'll use? Like if someone were to start wanting to make web games today, like what do you think you'd recommend? Because I know you've tried things like Phaser,
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on what you want to do, really, and what type of programmer you are. If you're a programmer, for me, I'm a huge control freak, so I don't like when like other game engines make you do things a certain
Hmm.
way. That's why I've always leaned towards using Phaser myself. But there's a lot of you have to do a lot of DIY with that. There is no program that you're looking at to see your level, so you have to use like third-party design things. I actually do use Flash when I make games in Phaser, just to like lay things out and then
Hmm.
export something that Phaser can use. So I still use Flash as a tool all the time. I'll use it for art. I'll use it for animation. I just don't build like full-on games, full-on
Right.
apps in it anymore. So the Flash will always have a legacy there. I think. I think a lot of people do stuff like that. I know Tyler Glale, his engine for Mugenics he's working on,
Hmm.
basically imports a lot of stuff from Flash still because that's what Edmund works in. I think for the art and stuff.
Right. And I mean, that's what
Um,
we still do at the Behemoth as well. All of the art
yeah,
is in
yeah.
Flash.
So like Flash is probably going to have its fingers in a lot of stuff for a long time.
I guess that brings up like my thought is that do you think there's still like a niche that Flash filled that's now it's missing now? Like someone, is there room for like a new piece of software that was like Flash?
Absolutely, and I don't know that it'll ever hit that big boom it originally did.
Hmm.
But I think if you go back to the Stone Age of Flash and the early Golden era, I think we can kind of appreciate that again. If there's a tool where people can easily make web-based games that have like mostly drag and drop, and I think Construct and Game Maker do kind of fill that. They do have a bit of a learning curve that I don't remember Flash having. But again, I came into Flash in version 2 when it was animation, so I've evolved with Flash. I think if I jumped into Flash 8 from not knowing anything, that might have had a bigger difference. I might have a different opinion here. Um, but either way, those are viable options. And again, those tools work with other tools. Like if you
Hmm.
have a preferred animation thing, if you like animating in Clip Studio, you could use those animations in these frameworks. Um, Collaborating is always going to be the biggest thing, though. So if you're not a big programmer, find a programmer, work with the programmer, and I think that's where the beauty of it always has been. Like the Stone Age of Flash was just people making things for fun, and they were very simple, very basic. When you got into that golden age, it was experimental. People were doing cool things, but it's still you could still tell it was just like the really amateurish. But once you got into that silver age, that was the age of collaboration, and that age could definitely come back. I don't think it's going to be Flash, but I don't think there's any one tool. I don't really think there's any one tool. We have so many tools, a huge variety. You just find somebody who's comfortable working in something and figure out how to work together. And I see a lot of that coming back. Like I think we've had a lot more web games in the last 1 or 2 years, and it might have just been because people were at home with the pandemic and nothing better to do than learn how to do this. But we've definitely had a small resurgence, and I would love to see that keep going. And I think that's mainly thanks to like Unity and Game Maker and
Hmm.
Construct and things like that. So
Cool. So I think we're gonna end sort of on that note. I got one last question, and then if anyone in Discord or YouTube has a question, just throw it at us. Um, what do you think was the best part of Flash, and what do you think was the worst part of Flash? Like, if there was one thing you could change about Flash in the past, what would you have done?
ooh, I don't know. Like for me, when I was using Flash, I don't know that I noticed the flaws until I learned how to use other things as
Hmm.
much. But the best part of Flash for me was just the ability to have this timeline, a visual timeline of all your animations, and being able to event on that timeline visually. So, like when you're doing an animation, for example, if you're doing a fighting game, when the fist is out in the animation, you just put on the keyframe, do punch or whatever, whatever your function is to make it punch. If you wanted to, and movie clips in particular, if you want to make like a character that has swappable armor, changeable hats, you didn't have to make a whole bunch of versions of that character. You didn't have to have a sprite sheet for every possible visual of that character. You just make the armor, layer it on top, and tell it what frame to go to. And it was really powerful in that way, that you could just quickly bang things out, and ideas would come from your head to a usable product in a day. Like it was crazy. I think the worst thing about Flash was probably just how flawed it was as a program, like where it would crash all the time. You would draw a line the wrong way and lose a day of work because you didn't save shit like that.
Yeah, I have lots of bad memories of like Newgrounds projects, not being able to, like, you would try to compile it
save.
and it would crash. Or even worse, what would happen is, we would compile some of those big collabs, and you would get out the SWF file, so it looked okay, but then randomly, like 5 minutes into the Flash file, a movie clip would be missing.
One of the fun things I did like was like, I don't know, you felt like a freaking genius when you would figure out solutions to that. Like, oh, we could compile this movie to an SWC file, and it's pre-compiled for making everything. Stuff like that. Whenever you came up with a solution to get around the broken parts, I don't know. I always loved that.
What about you, Lewis? Any thoughts? What was one thing you could change about Flash in the past if you could have changed it?
Yeah, I mean, just like it randomly crashing. It's weird how, like, as animators, you become comfortable with that reality. It's like, I know it's gonna crash soon, so I just kind of always have like this timer in my head of when it's gonna crash. And I mean, I get mad.
You have your finger on Control and S while you're drawing. As soon as you do a circle, Control and S, circle.
See, like, I'm weird. Like, I'll keep drawing, like trying to test my luck, and then my luck will run out. But I'm like, man, I almost had it that time.
I mean, still to this day, I regularly have people asking me to fix their corrupt Flash files.
Yeah, it's so weird, like how stuff would just break randomly, and like random, like it's like some symbols would have like they called it the Picasso effect. Like the line work doesn't work anymore. Like your lines are just like scribbles. Like no offense to Picasso, but it wasn't the drawing I'd made. And there was like no reason at all for it to behave that way. It's like, well, somebody's an asshole at that company that knew this was happening, but they was like, yeah, ship it.
Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us tonight. I want to thank you guys for helping me out here. Thank you, everyone, for watching. If you have any questions, just toss them in the YouTube. Guess we'll stick around for a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for
thanks
coming
for
up to the
having me,
meetup,
guys.
guys.
Thanks for having my volume low for most of the stream, Mike.
Sorry for blasting Flash loud 90s Flash movies into your ear.
Sorry for
Very well
Flash.
structured.
Yeah, sorry for Flash. So we got a question here in Discord from Belgave's Fox. So what are the similarities and differences between Flash and Shockwave?
Well, Shockwave and Flash originally were both developed at the same time or around the same time period. Shockwave was more of at the time it was built to be like an app development thing. It was clunky but also powerful. But like at the same time people were making early Flash content, you were seeing Shockwave stuff come out too. And it was very similar stuff. It was like beat up a celebrity, blow up an animal, stuff like that. It was being used for the exact same type of shit. So I don't remember what the story was, but I think the company that made Shockwave acquired what became Flash. It was called Future Splash at the time, and it was purely made for animation. Mm-hmm. I don't remember if they were trying to seamlessly merge the two or not, but like name-wise, they wanted the branding to be kind of the same. So like Flash was originally called Shockwave Flash when Macromedia had it. Mm-hmm. And Shockwave itself was actually a completely different thing. It was more comparable to making Java applets and things like that. And it didn't last as long. I remember people used it for very early like streaming, mostly like radio and things like that, players. But other than that, it didn't have a lot of upside for. I think it might have been ahead of its time even. And as Flash grew after it died, Flash filled in most of the stuff it could do anyway. So that's pretty much what the difference was.
So specifically, the software you used to make these Shockwave files was Macromedia Director, it was called. So it was a different product than Flash. And they sort of bundled both of these products under the Shockwave label, which is kind of confusing because the Shockwave player could only play Director files, but you needed the Flash player to play Flash files, even though they were Shockwave Flash files.
And that's why they're SWF files to this day.
And interestingly, we were talking about the Stone Age. Back then, the Shockwave you could do more with Shockwave back in the day. Back in that Stone Age.
It was more powerful, but it was not easy to learn.
Yeah, and it didn't have that sort of like, open up and start scribbling, ease of use that Flash had. And actually, I Director was actually around a long time. I think it was started in the 80s, actually. I think the company was called, it's really confusing because all these names are so similar, but the company was Macro Mind that made Director. And I think I might be wrong, so don't quote me on this, but I believe Macromedia bought Macro Mind. And they also bought Future Splash. So both of those companies sort of existed under the Shockwave label at Macromedia. But yeah, I mean, there were actually, it's interesting because it's like a different community. I know there were a lot of people that used Director back then, and there were actually a lot of like adventure games that you would buy on CD-ROM that used Director. It's not something that like I was ever really familiar with. I was always on the Flash side, and yeah, as time went on, Flash got more and more powerful and could pretty much do everything you would want to do in Director anyway.
Yeah. The only time I used it was I was working for I had a bank as a client, and they had this intranet they were doing, and it had freaking, they were using like Microsoft Access databases or something like that, and they wanted like a front end that worked in the web browser, and that's what I ended up building it in.
That's interesting.
It was janky, and they loved it at the time, but like, oh my god, I hated it.
I guess it's kind of interesting because I think back in the day on Newgrounds, before the automated portal, when the portal was just like a list that Tom manually updated, there was 1 or 2 Director games on there back in the day. But obviously when they switched over to the automated portal, that only supported Flash submissions. So just a little bit of trivia for you.
There you go.
Okay, next question is, do you think Scratch and Wick Editor do a decent job of filling the void where Flash left?
I haven't actually messed with Scratch too much, so I can't really talk to that. And I haven't touched Wick Editor since we had the Wick Jam. It had a lot of potential, but it just wasn't there yet. I would have to play with them both to give you a real good answer. I love the direction that Wick was taking. I assume Scratch is probably doing something the same. I love the idea of like having something people can just, like you said, you jump in, and if you can work a freaking paint program, it's kind of your starting point, and anything like that like really appeals to me. And again, like, they have limitations, and there's nothing wrong with limitations, because like we showed all these old Flash games where we worked within limitations and made some really fun stuff. So I mean, I think they're great. I don't know that they'll ever replace what Flash became. I don't think we'll ever get that Silver Age even with those type of tools. But I think if anybody's interested in just like dipping their toes in and making interactive stuff and playing around, hell yeah, go for it. They're good for that.
Oh yeah, I mean, the most important thing is just to make stuff.
Yeah.
Don't hem and haw about what tool to use. Just
No.
pick something that's easy and fun to learn and have at it. I personally haven't really messed with Scratch that much. I have messed with Wick Editor in the past, and yeah, I think like just having people exploring that space, that empty space that Flash kind of left, is really important. I don't think it's quite there yet, but hopefully someone comes in and sort of makes that easy 2D game maker tool.
Yeah.
And
if you're playing with Wick Editor, the other plus side is it is JavaScript, so you're learning JavaScript while you play with it. So even though you may not stick with Wick, I mean, it's a good place to start and take what you know and apply it to like tons of other potential learning apps.
Okay, next question. How many Flash games have you played that had built-in game controller support? Actually, I probably can't think of any offhand because game controller support didn't get added to Flash until very late in the Dark Ages. So we're talking like
and a lot of games that
2010s.
had it, I don't think I ever played with a game controller. So like even if they had it, I don't think I would remember.
Yeah, and like before that time, basically what everyone did is they would run Joy to Key, that basically mapped your joystick to keyboard buttons.
Yeah,
that's how you would play these Flash games. Because particularly on older keyboards, you would sometimes have this problem where if you like held too many keys down at once, like it wouldn't register keys properly. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Or you get the idiots that would use like shift for jump and you turn on sticky keys or something.
So yeah, I mean that's if I were to say one thing that I would change in the past of Flash is I would add features like that sooner. Like really focus on that kind of the features that games need to be fun. So things like controller support, being able to lock the mouse to the window, for like a shooter game. They added that later too, but like way too late. I would have maybe focused on adding GPU support more directly to the player instead of like requiring people to use this other engine. Let them make Flash files as they can, but use the video card to render those. It always seemed like Adobe was like too scared to really do that. And to be fair, I mean, one of the benefits of Flash was that it ran on everything. You know, it ran on a potato.
Yeah.
But you know, even if they couldn't support everything, if they could have just like supported the subset of computers with maybe like a subset of Flash, like maybe you can't use a blur filter or something, they could have used like the video card and had like really performant games. You know, 10 or 15 years ago, I think. Next question is, what parallels did you notice between Flash files and Java applets?
I mean, the basic thing is like anybody could host them. I mean, you didn't have to be a technical wizard. You didn't have to have more than access to like an FTP server to upload them or whatever. I mean, you would just put it on your site and it worked. You know.
I think this goes back to where like I was mentioning that, you know, when Adobe bought Macromedia, they were sort of trying to take over the world with Flash a little bit, whereas like Flash basically ran everything. You know, if you were buying tickets at the concert, the kiosk would be running Flash. If you're buying like food at Wawa, you know, it would be like a Flash kiosk. And
hell, you wouldn't have YouTube without Flash.
I mean,
videos for years.
And so they were really pushing this like run everywhere kind of philosophy at that point in time. And like one piece of software they came out with was like, it was called Flex Builder, which was pretty much like making Java applets like with the UI. And I mean, I think that's where Flash, you know, like it spread itself a little too thin in that like no one wants to use a Flash Java applet, you know, a Flash applet that's like a Java thing, right? Like I just want to, you know, most people just wanted to play little games on the web. And I think they sort of like overextended themselves a little bit in that era.
Yeah, especially as native HTML was catching up in that particular space. There was no reason for anything else to do.
Right.
Like stick to what you're good at.
I mean that brings up a good point because, you know, I talked about how Flash added this 3D support, and I literally couldn't remember any Flash games that used 3D that were 3D. You know, at that point in time,
I know I had seen some, but I couldn't
like none stick out in my mind. Right?
No.
And that's because at that point in time, HTML5 was getting big, and then, you know, HTML5 had WebGL support, which was basically the same thing. So it's like at that point, why not just cut out the middleman? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Why you don't need Flash anymore? Just code for the browser directly.
Yeah, like, and what you would need to get a 3D game running, you're not using the canvas in Flash IDE. Like you're not drawing anything, you know. So Flash is pointless. Don't use old technology.
Well, I think that's gonna wrap it up for us. Thanks everyone. Thanks Josh. Thanks Luis.
Thanks everybody.
I'll still be around if anyone wants to